Welcome to the first episode of The Golden Truth, a short video program that covers weekly financial issues. I'm Dave Kranzler. I run a money management firm called Golden Returns Capital, and my blog is Investment Research Dynamics. Links for those are contained in the description below. I just want to direct you to my blog. I've got a great article up there from Paul Craig Roberts, a Memorial Day article. And I also, a day or two ago, I posted an article about how we can end the gold market manipulation. Assisting me with the show's production is John Titus. John has been a lawyer for 20 years and was an engineer before that, and I appreciate his help on this.
Hey, Dave, how are you doing?
I'm well, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I got all your documents, and I'm ready to go with those. I have them queued up for the video. I've got to tell you, though, that European Central Bank website you sent me contains some of the more incriminating admissions that I have seen. So why don't you get started by telling us what on earth is going on with the ECB and gold in that document?
You know, it's interesting because the document itself, we're talking about the gold sale agreement recently signed last week by the European central banking system. There's 21 signatories to it. They're all central banks of countries that are members of the European Union. Just by way of background, they signed the first agreement in 1999. Central banks were unloading their gold reserves onto the market, and that was primary reason why gold was pushed down below $300 an ounce. However, at the same time, it also was annihilating the market value of the European Central Bank balance sheets because they hold gold as a reserve asset. So they signed this Washington agreement, which limited their gold sales to the first round of the agreement, limited it to 400 tons a year. And that was for the first 5 years, a total of 2,000 tons. They sold 2,000 tons over that 5-year period. They re-signed it in 2004, and they increased the tonnage they could sell by 100 tons. That was for another 5 years, a total of 2,500 tons. They re-signed it again in 2009 for another 5 years, and during that period between 2009 and today, they took the tonnage back down to 400 tons a year, a total of 2,000 tons over the period. Interestingly, they've only sold about 405 tons in total over the entire period, including a whopping 4.5 tons last year, which was mostly in the form of coinage. So at any rate, they acknowledge that gold remains an important reserve asset. The second statement, this is the first time it's appeared, and it took the gold investment world by surprise. Signatories will continue to coordinate their gold transactions so as to avoid market disturbances. Now, I was an English major, but I'm sure all of those of you who were not, when central banks or any business entity uses the word coordinate transactions, that implies collusion, it implies price fixing, so as to avoid market disturbances. Now, what could they possibly mean by that? And anytime a large amount of gold is sold on the market, it's going to push the price down a little bit. So, A, either they're worried about selling a lot of gold and pushing the price down, which they're not going to be able to do, or B, it was for whatever reason an implicit acknowledgement that there has been collusion among the central banks to fix the price of gold.
Okay, Dave. So let me ask you, with respect to the two statements on the ECB's website, had the ECB prior to the update of that website ever admitted either of those two statements before?
Yes, they've acknowledged that gold is an important reserve asset all along. And again, that's in direct contrast to the Federal Reserve, which does not own the gold that it holds on its balance sheet. The Federal Reserve does not own any gold. It does not hold gold as a reserve asset. It holds gold certificates on behalf of the U.S. Treasury. Bernanke not only denied that gold is money, when asked why the Federal Reserve holds gold or why central banks hold gold, he said, I don't know, I guess out of tradition. Well, clearly this statement is saying that the European central banking system is holding their gold as a reserve, which implies that it has value and that it's an important currency.
So the first statement that by the ECB that gold is money is not new, at least insofar as the ECB is concerned. It's really the second statement, and it's really the second statement that caught my eye, that is essentially a straight up admission that they are colluding in the regulation of either price and or the supply. Now I take it that's got to be new, right?
Yeah, Nick, that's correct. That's brand new. It's the first time it's shown up. You actually had an interesting comment about that when we were discussing this, about from a lawyer's perspective. If you wanted to share that, that would be great.
Well, I actually almost fell out of my chair when I read that second statement, because it is such a direct and bald-faced admission that just any time people make an admission that they are colluding in anything, you as a lawyer, the hair on your back of your neck goes up, especially if it's your own client talking. The ECB statement is essentially that they're colluding to fix the price of probably the world's most important commodity. And that's what's such a stunning admission. I mean, I would be stunned if to see a law firm, even a first-year associate in a law firm, allow a statement like that to be released to the public, much less an institution as big and as powerful as the European Central Bank to come out and make that admission. It's just it gobsmacked me.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, because it raises the question as to exactly why they put that statement in there, because it's largely suspected that these central banks are pretty much out of gold, which is why the ECB system hasn't even come close to reaching its yearly quota in terms of what it sells. I mean,
so, and if I could kind of cut to the significance or one possible view of the ECB's update of its agreement, which is really that agreement doesn't have anything to do with the real limits on what they plan to sell in the way of gold. What it really has to do with is optics and the public perception. In other words, somebody would look at that agreement and say, oh, look, the ECB raised its limits by 100 tons. They must really need it because they've got all this gold they have, and they're going to go out in the market and sell it, and they need to up the limits. Is that a fair characterization?
that's a fair characterization. In this particular case, they're back down to 400 tons. They only had one 5-year period where they were doing 500 tons. But it brings up your point is that why do they even need this agreement in the first place if they're not even selling close to 400 tons a year, or 4.5 tons last year? And like you said, it's for the optics of putting the agreement in place so that the public thinks that the gold is there to be sold. And we saw definitive proof that the view that these Western central banks are out of gold, we saw definitive proof of this when Germany asked for part of its gold back that the Federal Reserve safe keeps. The Federal Reserve safe keeps 1,500 tons, supposedly, on behalf of Germany. The gold was moved there after World War II because the Germans were terrified the Russians were going to come into Germany and steal their gold. So at some point, Germany's going to want that gold back because that's not a risk anymore. So it was agreed upon that the U.S. would sell 300 tons over 7 years. Well, Hugo Chavez repatriated 160 tons of Venezuela's gold from 4 different central banks around the world, and he got it back in 4 months. Why is it taking 7 years for the U.S. to deliver 300 tons of gold back to Germany?
Well, it's a good question. I mean,
that amount of gold is something that could be air transported in a couple of cargo flights from New York City, from JFK Airport to Frankfurt. So, the reason why the U.S. hasn't been able to come up with gold is because it's not there to be transported back to Germany. In fact, in the first year of the 7-year, 300-ton agreement, the U.S. returned a whopping 5 tons of gold, and it was in the form of a mishmash of foreign coins that Germany demanded to be recast into the 400-ounce LBMA standard bars that central banks hold. So where are the bars that Germany gave to the U.S. to safekeep?
So let me see if I understand this correctly, Dave. Just insofar as the German situation is concerned, the Federal Reserve holds 1,500 tons of gold for Germany. Germany asked for 300 of those tons back. The Federal Reserve agreed to give Germany 300 tons back, but provided a 7-year schedule to do so. And in the first year of that schedule, the Federal Reserve provided 5 of the 300 tons back to Germany. Is that right?
That's correct.
Wow. Anything else, Dave? You want to wind it up?
No, I think that should wrap it up. I think the point to take away from this is A, what was interesting about this latest Washington agreement that was extended by the European Central Bank system is that they had an implicit acknowledgement or maybe even explicit acknowledgement that they do collude to try and control the market price of gold. And B, it's likely that, as everyone has suspected, not only is the Federal Reserve out of gold, but so are the European central banks.
Okay, fair enough.
One last point, I'd like to, again, thank you, John, for all your help on this and co-producing it. And I would like to invite people back for our next video. We're going to be doing these once or twice a week. Until next time, that, my friends, is the golden truth.